Welcome to another episode of the RevOps Lab. I'm here with Philip, and our guest today is Alex Freeman. Great to have you. Okay, so we spoke before, and I'm really excited about this conversation. I think it's going to be awesome. Just for context, you're currently the head of RevOps at YouGov. I think head of RevOps and Enablement, if I read it correctly. And YouGov, just to share some stats, I think you're 3,500 people. Last year was above 300 million USD. It's a publicly listed company. I looked through the board decks and investor reports, and I would say RevOps complexity pretty high. So I'm sure you have a lot to do. So thank you so much for being here. Maybe let's kick off. Who are you? What do you do outside of what I just said?
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Jens. Yeah. So Alex Freeman. We call it Sales Operations still, though my remit does include kind of customer success. So that's nice. We're getting there. So outside of work, I live in London. I've got a wife and two young boys, so that keeps me pretty busy. So I don't have huge hobbies apart from home renovation, something out of the garden, because we bought a house that had a lot of work needing doing, and so I keep having to do that. And just spending time with the family. Love eating. So barbecuing, cooking, anything for good food and good company is great. And then I really love what I do. So I love kind of talking and a lot of networking with my peers, trying to learn from other people. Really conscious of it's a phrase, try and never be the smartest person in the room. And so I really always want to spend more time with people to really understand where's go-to-market going, what are some of the latest trends, and then trying to really work out, okay, this is just a fad. How would this apply? What can I take away? How can I keep developing myself as a professional, as well as my team, and obviously the business and drive growth.
Yeah. I mean, we've been huge fans of the general RevOps community. We're part of a few Slack groups, also run our own meetups. I saw you were actually, speaking at a meetup lately in London, right, about the tech stack. I think it's a fantastic community. People are being very open and help each other out, which I think is always great. Today we want to talk about, some lessons learned, especially around, kind of being seller friendly and seller first. And so maybe let's kick off with that. Like, what do you mean with, seller first? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, so I guess there's a number of things. I think at the highest level, we've got two customers for RevOps or Sales Ops. In the internal customers, that's sort of our primary customer, that's the sales team, but obviously keeping in mind the external kind of customer of the business. And our job really is to get the most out of them. There's some interesting, narrative we can explore later about, the value of RevOps, and people don't like saying we're a support function, which I get, because I do believe we're driving revenue value, but ultimately we're doing that by helping us be as efficient as possible on the go-to-market side. And I saw a stat from Boston Consulting Group saying a mature RevOps organization can save 30% of kind of go-to-market costs, or help drive growth to that extent. And I think that resonates with me, and that's what we're trying to do. And so ultimately trying to unlock the value of the people we have on the commercial side so that they can drive more impact. And so that's the core of what I mean. And if we think of the typical place where maybe sort of sales and revenue, sales operations was maybe 10 years ago, more of a sort of CRM admin, box ticking, that kind of tension between kind of leadership and management on, we need to know this and this, and so make this mandatory, add this step in. Let's be, really prescriptive on every step of the process versus, sellers that just want to go and make money. And so I kind of try and have my kind of guiding principle, which is, I want the business to grow more, to make more revenue. The way we do that is our sellers make more money. Basically, they want to sell more, therefore earn more. And so actually we've got a really good alignment on priorities, but it's not always felt that way because, again, I think typically we've not been amazing always. And it's more historically, I think most of the people I talk to have a similar approach now, really thinking, well, what do the sellers and our revenue teams actually need? What do they want? How can we really kind of serve them, as opposed to just, adding more fields in, building some more reports? And so the focus really is to help shape everything we design and build for them under that light, and then really sell those benefits through, saying, we think this is going to help you earn more money, and here's why. And occasionally there needs to be kind of compromises. CPQ for me is the most obvious one. No seller really wants to do that, but you have business requirements, and ultimately people are paid a salary and not just commission. But then even with those things, like, how do I make this as easy as possible for you? And I have a theory, which is that we've taught sellers to hate admin, maybe more than they actually hate admin, and it's because we asked them for low quality rubbish. When I joined, we had a checkbox on an opportunity that was mandatory to move from one stage to the other. I mean, it tells you absolutely nothing because it's ticked for all deals. So it's like, it is pointless. It is a way of just giving someone that the middle finger and saying, I don't care about your time, and I want to flip that round and really figure out actually how can we help? How can we make sure we're aligned and we're pulling together?
Yeah, I mean, this resonates a lot with Philip and me. We founded this company, actually, Weflow, on a mission to enable sellers to do less admin work. This was the initial product, by either automating or simplifying, data entry tasks. And so, I mean, it's something that I think resonates really deeply with us both. What are some of the common pitfalls you observed in your career with doing that, right? You already mentioned, some, maybe stage exit criteria that were too harsh and actually never used in terms of, right, like collecting the data, but never ever doing anything with it. I mean, I'm curious, like, if you would list these pitfalls or things you've observed, like where should people start to stop doing certain things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so much of what we want to capture ends up being qualitative data. Like, I don't know many people who are worried that the prices in their opportunities aren't about right. Now, sure, the forecasting, are they right early enough? There's a whole piece there for sure. But once the deal's closed, so you kind of know those details get captured. You might get worried about important things like billing address, particularly for repeat customers. It's probably not really getting looked at and updated. So there's a challenge there. But I would say the majority of the data that we want to try and gather and run really cool insights off is just qualitative data. Things like reasons for loss, variety of things in that even what stage is it? You want to define it nicely with criteria, with entry and exit criteria, but it is still qualitative. You're not sort of measuring it, just trying to get a sense of progress. And the trouble is I'm sure you're aware, when it historically, when it's qualitative data and you're asking people to fill it in, manually, then it doesn't matter if you get the data. If the data's no good, they can just pick the top option on the pick list or the option that seems like they're less at fault. They can write the bare minimum. It's just not a very satisfying, way. And typically, when I talk about the data issues that I've faced internally and previously with consulting other customers, that's normally where the issues come. It's that we've got some stuff, or if it's mandatory, we've got it. If it's not mandatory, it's probably not filled in, but we don't really know the value of it anyway. And so using, we've got tools similar to what you were talking about, trying to solve that are capturing that data and putting it in for us from our our emails and our calls, because again, we now in this kind of AI era, we've got access to all this material. We don't need to get people to manually put it in. They can start polishing it and shaping it, and we can use that as a way to guide conversations. I think the other area that I've been particularly struck by in the last kind of 6 months or so is how so much of what we can do with data in kind of insights, and particularly kind of the sort of the predictive AI more than the generation AI, is kind of disempowering to end users. Again, so much of our analytics in the revenue space is done on the whole, and we essentially just make these guiding assumptions, and they kind of work over time to help us get a good forecast, but the data isn't strong enough to be able to predict individual outcomes. We've just sort of aggregated it, but it can look quite disempowering to the end user when Salesforce provides scoring that I could use. We use GON, but I know there's lots of alternatives, and everyone gives a score to a deal, but the seller can't change it. They can't query it, they can't say, you've marked this down because we haven't had any contact in the last 2 weeks, but my champion's been on leave for the last 2 weeks, and they've already set up our next step, and actually things are going well. And so it's sort of things that gets told at them that ultimately they don't even use. It's their manager and their leaders that use it because it helps give them insight when they're not on the front lines. But it can feel a bit disempowering, and I think that creates easily a sort of a skepticism of the value of these tools, because if they're helping people that aren't yourself, you need to try and understand that. And again, if it's actually not helping you, and in many ways you're having to sometimes, it's making more work for you when you say, actually, no, that one looks bad, but it's not because of this. That makes life tougher. So one of the things we looked at doing, and I did with a small startup, is we created a machine learning model to look at predicting close dates. And what it gave us was two really nice kind of parallel options. We essentially could swap out close date on our kind of x-axis for our forecast. So instead of using the close date, we could use the predicted close date, and we had a data-driven time-bound forecast, which we could use either a data model on the amounts, or we could just use kind of commit most likely best case categories. But that's kind of so normal in a way. The really cool thing was we were able to use Slack, and we could push that through to individual sellers themselves and say, hey, you've got this deal that you've predicted is going to close at the end of the month, and the computer saying it's actually going to close in 4 months' time. Now, do you want to accept the change? Do you want to maybe update the stage? Is there some pieces that maybe of information that are misleading? Or do you want to reject it? And if so, just give a quick reason why. Why is that not the case? And the great thing there as well is all of a sudden, then we can start to get some stats around this that are specific. So if Yanis, I've served you 100 recommendations over, let's say, the last year or whatever period, and you've accepted 40 of them, and 60 of them you've rejected. And then of those 60, 10 of the times you were right. That means that the computer, I always call it the computer, the model was right 5 times more often than you. You've got to start paying more attention. And I just, took those numbers because they're easy to remember and we can understand them. But you could do that a lot quicker and at a smaller volume. But start saying, look, we can really see who on the team is learning from it and not. And we can sort of point maybe to some of your peers that have been on a journey and they've started to incorporate that. And all of a sudden, all the amazing things we can do with data and models and kind of AI in this sort of revenue space can really empower kind of all levels of the organization, more than just, hey, don't worry, the AI can help draft your emails for you, which, is pretty table stakes in the sort of ChatGPT.
I hear you talking about basically about two different aspects. So one, I think, is, if I may recap it in my own words, is sort of like you have this technology aspect where technology is improving, and because it's improving, if you utilize it in the right way, of course, then it can save a lot of time. So automations, LLMs, but probably also like very like stupid things. Like, for example, if you want to, just an example from Salesforce, because that's the ecosystem we are mostly in, is like when you want to log an email with the Salesforce extension, you need to click at least 3 times before you can log that email, right? So you could just like develop a solution where you don't have to click at all. It just does it in the background. And only if you want to manipulate it, you can click into it. Just like super stupid example, or like your machine learning system with the close date push, right? So like utilizing technology in the right way and really like, getting the most out of it, I would say. And then on the other side, you have this whole mindset aspect, or like this underlying philosophy, this way of thinking, like having a framework of how to approach even aligning with the sellers. And in my mind, actually, like technology is amazing, obviously, right? Like we're product people, we love it. But I think before you can solve a problem with technology, you actually need to understand how do I incentivize like my sellers to actually interact with it and to accept it. And I think this is so much harder to do than building like a machine learning model, which is crazy if you think about it. But I think that's basically the reality. Or would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And before I joined YouGov, I was working in sort of startups, and I was doing some consulting when I was at my previous company with a number of some bigger companies as well. But this time we're working with about about 300 sellers, 50 SDRs, and maybe 100 people in, we call it client services, but customer success effectively. And, across the globe, I think about 30 different countries we've got offices in. And yeah, it's kind of the change management piece is always harder than you think. And getting that buy-in and the big learning that I've tried to take away is actually, RevOps we influence really from the side. And so and it's tricky. I think it depends who you report into, but I do think the person that oversees the revenue function or typically in the sales function is the key one, even if you don't report there, because ultimately people only care about what their boss cares about in a company. Again, in a larger company, I would say the CEO and the CFO, they're basically mythical figures for most people. They'll never speak with them, see them. They could say something once or twice, and it doesn't impact people's day-to-day. Now, I kind of need them on board to hold the CRO. In my case, my boss is Chief Commercial Officer. You want them to be on board, so they hold them accountable. It's not just you saying, hey, we've got to do this. It's like, you've got that full buy-in. But then they need to hold, her direct reports or his direct reports to the standard. And the goal is always you hold them and you hold them on behalf of their team to that standard. And then that sort of top-down, kind of trickle-down, I think is what's required for change management. I've had a number of people, they effectively want me to be the compliance police and go and make it happen. And it doesn't work. It's not what I want to do. I want to cash in my organizational credibility on it. And again, it shows that the change management is done wrong. It's like, look, no, we need to solve the problem. We're solving the wrong problem. And again, we could probably get a lot of this stuff filled in, but is it accurate? Is it usable? Are we just taking away people from frontline activities? And because I think those are the values to your solutions that save time. It's not as much the time saved, because typically if you're saving time, it's not being done properly in the first place. So the time saving is only a small component, and probably your estimation of the time saved is inflated because most people aren't actually doing it. They're doing something else. But if it's a valuable job to be done, what really needs to happen, then it's getting it done accurately and properly. Super helpful. So, I like to say that we've taught sellers to hate admin rather than they necessarily intuitively hate it, because we ask them typically to do stupid things. I think of it a bit like children. We tend to ask them to do something. They need to do it in the way we ask them, and they need to kind of tell us they've done it. Prove that you've done it. The whole, if it's not in Salesforce, it didn't happen, idea is, and there's some really good, memes and videos on this stuff. If everyone was treated like sales, like you're a product guy, so I'm sure you always ship your features on time. But if you look at the sales forecast and the discrepancy they get, whereas let's be honest, engineering normally always ends up a few months late, and no one's getting fired on that side for missing the roadmap. And there's a real truth to that. I just think it is probably the hardest job there is, and they're treated a different way. But actually, smart people, who know they can earn a lot of money if they do a good job, they're motivated to do that. I want to tie everything again that they're doing back into their ability to earn, because that's our ability to grow and serve the business. So, yeah, I think creating this environment is paramount. And then the other side, which I didn't touch upon, is, and they're kind of like two sides of the same coin, is the being kind of customer focused as well, customer first. And again, the job of RevOps to make that smooth kind of customer journey. And that's the other side. And I do think those two things kind of line up nicely. If our internal journey is smooth and makes sense and well designed, then the external journey will be smooth. And again, we also know if the customer journey is nice, then it's going to be easier to convert and sell. So they both seem to fall very close together, and really try and make most of my decisions around trying to optimize for making it easy for the internal and external customer.
Yeah. So how do you do it? Do you basically incentivize sellers? So if you fill this out, you get like a $50 bonus at the end of the month, or how do you find that alignment?
No, because I think that's the wrong way of incentivizing, because the point is they should be able to make thousands of dollars by selling more. So I incentivize them by trying to convince them that if they do what I say, they'll be able to sell more. And that's the tricky thing. And I think, again, this is my piece about why often with data and analytics and insight, we've not empowered our end users. The reason that they're not giving us kind of clean data is they've never seen the advantage of it for them. I think typically, so it's like, how can we feed back insight to help them do their job? And one of the things I think about on this is kind of process design, which we sort of touched on like tangentially on what we've been talking about. But, I've pitched this internally. I'd rather we all run at 95% efficiency, but the same 95 that we all run at our different 100%, because you just can't learn at scale. And particularly in a business like ours, it's large, global, there are lots of people wanting to do things differently. And some of those differences are going to matter, right? And you're going to need some branches in your process, but at the same time, every time you add one, you're watering down your ability to learn quickly, because now you've got to factor in, a different sort of branching journey. The corollary to that is I also don't want to create super rigid processes. I want to have, essentially think of it in terms of, I suppose gates is a good point, or points on a map where I want to go very specifically from here to here to here and figure out the right things to measure. And the way between them can be different. So to pick an obvious example, let's think of prospecting. A lot of companies, will hold their SDRs to, call targets for outbound dialing and email targets for outbound. And I kind of understand why, but I just think it's flawed. Like we just, and I know they try and do this as well, but it's the meeting booked target that you really want, and ultimately the sort of the pipeline conversion target. And we should recognize that different people will work differently best. Some people are going to like being on the phone, some aren't. And again, our buyers, we don't have a culture of cold calling. I'd like to encourage it at some point, but we don't. But I pick up a cold call, if I'm not in a meeting. The trouble is I'm in a meeting most of the time, so normally I can't. And if I'm super busy, heads down, I'm obviously not also going to pick it up. But, there are times you're like, okay, I'm just sending some emails now. The 5-minute disruption ain't going to kill my day, and I'll pick it up and take it. But that's the advantage of the multi-channel as well, is you meet your buyers where they're at, but you also allow different people to shine. And sure, if you're underperforming now as an SDR, you're not hitting your meeting book targets, and your peers are, well, sure, I get then we can focus on the activity. Are you doing enough? But ultimately, I think we all know this, quality dominates in these kind of things. And we want to encourage quality. And the best way to do that is to measure the things that matter. And again, have that sort of flexibility. And so I've tried to design in as we've built processes, what are the kind of the gates, the sort of the rock points where we want to get, be very clear we've got here, but then how much flexibility can we give in how we get there? So again, people are encouraged to get there, where I kind of say that on an individual level, sales is, half art, half science. And on an organizational level, it's all science, but we don't want to scrub out that art level at the bottom piece. And again, the sort of the incentive there to get on board and to do these things, and if need be, to try and increase, activity levels if they're underperforming, is, well, with enablement, we can better support you if you're doing things the same. We can provide learning materials, supporting materials, all sorts of things, if you're working the same way we are. But it's much harder to provide for you if you're off, blazing your own trail in a completely different environment.
Yeah, it's so interesting. When I listen to you, my thought is the whole time, okay, there's a big discussion where RevOps should report into, but then, when you actually talk, it sounds almost like RevOps has often been too focused on serving the leadership audience and maybe neglecting the end user angle. And I don't think it's unimportant to serve the leadership audience. I think that's not my point, but maybe that has actually gotten a lot more say, because if there's a next board meeting, you basically stop everything and you help the CRO prepare the next board meeting. Is that necessarily the best use of RevOps time? Question mark, right? I don't know the answer, but I think this is what actually is happening in my head right now, which I find super interesting, because I personally, it makes a lot of sense in my mind, but I'm curious what you think about that. Yeah.
I think it's a great insight. It's like the sort of the top-down planning versus bottom-up. And obviously we want to be more strategic. We want to affect leadership. But I would say, well, how do we do that? And how is often actually, well, we need to make the whole thing work and the details work. There's a quote from a friend of mine who does RevOps at a company called Sweep. It's from his CEO, but he says 95% of strategy is tactics. I think there's something, there, and it's similar. Absolutely, I want to be serving the C-suite. I want to be invaluable to them because that's where my promotion, my pay rise, all sorts is going to come from, my career development. But you don't do that by only listening to what they think. And you've got to work out how we're going to actually make this happen. And again, it's so easy to make something that looks good on paper, but if you can't do the change management, as you were saying earlier, Philip, it's not going to survive first contact with the enemy. And so it's a balance to pick. But it feels like it's increasingly kind of well accepted now that, if you're starting a new role, where you start with is speaking to all the people around the business, really understanding the company, where are people winning right now, where do they need more help? And that's the sort of thing you'll pitch back into the C-suite to say, here you go. Here's how we're designing the roadmap. And obviously we're taking in the business trajectory and the initiatives that we're leading from this level, but we're going to shape them based on what we're hearing on the ground. And I think there's often, just so much, that's where you can find the quick wins. I think that's where you can find the substantial roadblocks. When I hired for my enablement team and I bought a lot of software, we were coming into a new financial year and a new strategic plan. So I kind of queued it all up. But I essentially pitched to the CFO and my boss at the time, who was our chief operating officer, that what we needed was revolution, not evolution, because we had we refer to it as kind of culture or compliance problems across the organization, and it's the commercial organization. And it's always best practice in any kind of design function like product or operations. What's the priority? One thing at a time, do it properly, kind of move on. But that would be just like playing whack-a-mole. Let's go fix it. Let's whack that one down. Here's another one pops up. And we need to rechange the whole landscape, the whole way we see set sales internally, the tooling we provide them, how we set everything up for success. And that's going to mean doing a load of things, 50 to 60% as well as they should be. And so, after 1 year of doing that, this was the year of really doubling down and getting further value. But we've started steering that Titanic, moving the ship and getting things ready. And inevitably, there are some things I missed, some things that I didn't get the plan correct in the rollout. So I need to go back and reevaluate. But the general principle of and again, it's going to depend on the business situation beforehand, but looking at us, this is pretty sales unfriendly. Let's shift that entirely, and then let's focus on this, and then we can start holding this higher standards. The other way I've referred to it is this kind of a bar. We had this really low bar compliance threshold, and it was so low. We had a Salesforce hygiene dashboard, and it had opportunities that are due to close in the next 2 months with no activity in the last 1 month, 30 days. And I mean, it's just like pointless. If you tick that versus you don't, you're still not going to win the deal. You need way more than one every month to, so like, again, it's just this pointless admin bar. Whereas I said, no, we're going to set a best in class aspirational threshold, and we don't have to hit it, but we're just trying to get close. And again, the sales job internally to the team is clear. It's like, we're going to, we rolled out MedPick, for example, and we want to do our best at filling this in. And I believe it, and communicated, and we got some buy-in, and obviously you never get 100%. But like, you do this well, you're going to close more deals. But it's not just that. It's, if you do this really well, your manager's going to have a much better understanding of where you are. So your one-to-one's going to be much more focused, and you're going to get much more insight. You're going to learn from him or her a lot quicker, and therefore you're going to get promoted a lot quicker. And again, when leadership are in on one of your deals, they're going to see everything squared away. You're going to plant that seed that you're someone's house is in order, that can be trusted. So not only is your short to medium term earnings going to go up, your medium to long term career growth is going to that time is going to come way down, and you're going to be able to really drive forward much quicker. So it was all right kind of creating that environment and trying to sell it in. You're not, I'm not trying to convince anyone that I'm going to help you close one more deal this month or this quarter. That's a tough sell, and that's going to fail in most cases. But it's like generally all these things are going to help. And the other thing is, it's a lot of what I've done. I try, we've we've done a number of things around obviously our tools and the people we speak to. But so much of sales is not about your product and things. It's about understanding your buyer and personas and industries and just sales skills. And so much of it is like, but most of what we're providing for you will last you for your whole career. Not in a static way. You need to keep doubling down on it. But if I only invest in you to help me and help me now, that's a pretty rubbish, very transactional relationship. It's like, if we have that trust that as a business, we'll invest in you and give you, skills that will evolve over the whole of your career, wherever you are. And, that's great. I think the phrase in startups is no one likes the idea of investing in your people only for them to leave. But the worst thing would be having people that never left because no one else wanted them. And, that
sounds pretty shitty, actually.
Yeah. So it's a good way of flipping it.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I have so many thoughts because I think it, obviously building Weflow, we think very deeply about what you just alluded to. And, the way I dream of, the future world is as following. You ideally automate all sales methodology, entry tasks, email, meeting, contact data. You enrich them automatically, right? Like even stages, close date, as you alluded to, they can almost go away to essentially do two things, right? Provide the managers with a lot better visibility into what's actually happening, because the reality is often that's not the case, right? These one-on-ones and pipeline reviews, they're very much based on gut feeling, hearsay, conversation, instead of actually looking at the hard data. And these are simple things. We're not even talking AI, right? This is like, is there a next meeting in the books, right? Is there multi-threading, right? And what does it actually mean? How is it defined? Is there path to power, right? So like some fundamentals, I'd say, in usual sales processes. And then the other piece, and I think that's super exciting actually, is provide actionability to the reps, right? Like basically you go and take the data and then enable them to be on top of their game, right? Because I think that's also reality. If you work in a cadence or in a sequence, the sequence tells you what to do. Whether that's the right thing or not, I mean, that's to be debated. But if you work deals and pipeline management, the system should help you what to do, right? And I think this is where everything is going, right? Like, and I personally think it's a bright future. Just have to apply it, right? But I think it really goes down to what you said initially, and I love this so much. Is essentially, if reps make more money, the company makes more money, and that's actually kind of part of the fundamental mission, of the whole setup. So like quota attainment is such an important metric, right? Sales productivity is so important, and I mean there needs to be a healthy distribution in that, I believe that these are the two cornerstones for all things deal execution and essentially sales productivity. Just some thoughts because I'm listening to you and I have to smile the whole time because I'm like, Philip and we talk so much about it, right? And the reality is also that like not everybody's thinking that way in the community, right? And I think that definitely needs to change. I think there's obviously the field isn't that old, but I think there's it's actually quite promising because also the underlying the change management problem, right? Like we talked about earlier, I do believe that that's gonna become it's always a challenge, but I hope that some of those challenges will be solved with the more next gen tools. I think we're already seeing some of that today. But yeah, just some thoughts. No question. Curious what you think.
Really good, interesting point on automation. I think absolutely, and technology is such a place to play here. And as you said, again, I've done this with our lead process. We've essentially automated all the stages because essentially it was the most, I think, menial of all the tasks you asked rep to do. They had to take the lead, put it in their name. They had to email the lead. Before I joined, they had to attach the email to the lead, and they had to move the lead to in progress. About 5 different things, even though it's only one part of the task. And so now it can automatically go into their name. As soon as they've emailed them, we sync the email to the record. We move it from open to in progress. If we get a response, we move it to a stage called engage. So again, we get more of a funnel. I mean, I hate the lead as an object because it's Is it a person? Is it a company? Is it a process? Well, it's all three, but I kind of get why we create so many and many at customers. So I can't just auto create. So we sort of smunched it into as close as I can. And then, the rep just needs to do the email. But if I think, and I want to do something similar with sales around the stages, and so the sales process around the stages again, if we've got a stage for propose, and we just need to define it in a way that we can measure it. So if propose is a proposal's been created or a proposal has been sent, well, we use Deal Hub from our CPQ, like I can get that to tell me and write the flag to tick it, at which point it can move into the stage or out of the stage again. There's a lot of reasons to define stages differently, but we should be able to do that for most of it. And again, then it just helps people focus on their job. But close date and sales methodology, two really good things that, again, I want to give the reps help on, but I don't want a fully automated system with them out of the loop, because they need to say, otherwise you get skill erosion. So we all know that close dates are tricky because sellers only have limited control, but we do have some levers that we can do, a good understanding of what the customer's trying to achieve, and therefore a mutually beneficial date to aim towards, and there are skills to do to really help manage those deals. When I joined, because we were coming to the end of a 4-year plan to double revenue and double profit, and we were behind because it was 2023 and everyone was behind, I think. And then it was very hard. I wasn't able to do very much because operations is a medium to long term play. I didn't want to mess about. One of the things I did is I renamed stages. We had our penultimate stage before close one was called verbal commitment, and I just changed that to manage to close because I wanted to sort of flip the script on what we're trying to do. Verbal agreement makes it sound like, it's kind of in the bag, just haven't got it signed yet. Whereas managed to close, when I said you're now doing that the last few yards, but that are key to get this over the line. And I think about that in terms of close dates, similar sort of sales methodology. We could train you with amazing medpick questions, but if it all starts getting auto-filled for you, you're going to forget, or you're not going to get as good at asking those questions. And again, we could run the best training in the world, and in a year's time, you're going to need something else. It's no longer the best training in the world, and it's a year old since you've done it. So finding that balance, and I love Slack effectively for this, where there's two schools of thought. Do you want, as a rep, would you like to sit down once a week and make all your updates? I get it's a nice time blocking idea, but also it means your CRM is essentially a weekly cycle rather than a real-time system, which isn't as ideal. And actually, a lot of them are quick and easy. What I think the better thing is that real-time updates. So, and I would even probably ideally do it with the stages, saying things like, we've seen it's moved here. Do you agree it's here? Because we could do other things like, let's take that proposal piece, right? I could say, well, for our medpick, we're expecting you to have, let's say, a simple 0 to 3 grading system. These letters are a 2 and these ones are a 1 before you proceed, and you've not got here and here yet. And using that sort of Slack workflow kind of works nicely, as opposed to an automation or validation that sort of moves it, doesn't move it, fires some errors, tells you, need to do it. It kind of quite nicely brings people along on that journey that says, look, I can see you've got here. We're a little concerned that these aren't to the level we would expect. And again, I think it can be empowering, and again, a chance maybe for them to say, oh, actually, you're right, I haven't updated it, but then we make a few changes, but actually we're confident we know this well enough. Or even potentially to say, we've got nothing on the paper process yet. They just won't talk to us until they've made us vendor of choice. Not ideal, but I'm not going to wind them up by forcing the issue. And again, that's the sort of building that flexibility. I really think this sort of Slack integration, idea has so much, merit for engaging with your data on that kind of real-time piece. You've got your calls and your emails captured and understood, so it's surfacing your next steps. Boom, we also see how that data, can be structured and affect the sort of the CRM data, and we surface to you where we think things are missing, and then allow you as the rep to sort of speak back to the machine to, a machine learning model, so they get to learn, you get to train it by your responses. And then we also get some data on when you accepted it, when you didn't. Maybe Yanis is bad at close dates, but he's actually much better than the machine at stages or price or whatever it might be. And so again, you can break it down into that level and get some data to sort of see and generally feel empowered. And and I think that's the great at the moment where we've got to with AI. It feels like it's kind of close to that personal assistant for us in different ways. It's not all joined up, but that's such a valuable thing.
Yeah, we're getting there. I mean, I think the future is like unstructured plus structured data, or like the unstructured data will make it a lot easier to structure it, and then also have a much larger pool of data that essentially influences, and whether that's like, kind of going directly into the system of record, or it's just a suggestion, right? I think it will for sure drive a lot of efficiencies, but yeah, I think really the question then is like, how do you take that and actually ensure that the right action is to be taken, so that the likelihood of deals, being won increases, and then being able to measure that, right? I think that's where we need to get to, and I don't think we're there, but I think it's a really, really interesting time to be in revenue right now, and in our world for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that analyzing, you said that huge bucket of unstructured data from all your, customer facing and prospect facing correspondence, I can't be far away from being able to draw trends, compared to our performance data, and say, hey, we think your top 5 priorities should be, these few things. It's number 1, and you look at it and you're like, number 1, yeah, well, that's obvious. Number 2, you're like, oh, that doesn't actually make sense. The computer's found random things. We're just ignoring. Oh, but number 3, I hadn't thought of that. And actually, if I added in a few extra keywords and rerun that kind of query, prompt, like, we could really refine that. And it feels like, again, it shouldn't just be me setting up and telling the system what it needs to look at. Can't be too far away from it prompting me and saying, hey, on the data kind of performance-wise, we've sort of isolated these trends. And then to your point, there's so much around the data capture to make some of that work, because it's not just the unstructured data you talked about and that multi-threading, understanding the personas, how are we capturing all that information, sellers that are, buyers and buying committees that aren't in Salesforce. So the data challenge for the AI era is huge. And that's why I think, again, when we need, as much as possible, take it out of the hands of sellers, but where we need it, then we want to make it friendly for them. We want to make it empowering for them. Because again, they're not stupid. They want to earn more money. If you can show the path to do that, then I'm confident they come on board.
And I think that is the perfect moment to end with such a positive outlook on the future, and also not calling sellers stupid, I think is good. No, but in all seriousness, Alex, this was great. I think we need to get you back on the show in a couple of weeks and just dive a bit more deeper into it, because I think there's a lot more to unpack. So yeah, thank you for joining. We always ask our guests one final question. And what I want to ask you is, what's one book that you would recommend our listeners they should definitely check out?
Good question. Two books come to mind. I'm going to GM slowly too. So, Revenue Architecture by Jacco van der Kooj. Probably didn't pronounce his name correct, so apologies. Probably not an unusual one. And I've also been reading recently Sean Lane's the Revenue Operations Manual Handbook. I can't quite remember what, and just really helpful. There's so many free kind of resources around. Great podcasts, blogs, lots of stuff you can learn. But having it all, having someone work through and condense and systemize it into a book. And this isn't one of those classic business books, which is really just a long form article that's been spun out into 10 different ways of saying the same thing. It genuinely helpful. So I can really recommend it. And just helpful because, again, it's such a broad area. There's things that I've not done hands-on because of what my career journeys look like, and just getting some views. And even though I do believe we didn't get to touch on it today, but wanting to solve everything with sort of first principles based thinking, I think it's absolutely invaluable to learn from others. Build experience, learn what people are doing, think of different ways, and then you can work out and apply it to your specific kind of business context.
I love that. And both of them were guests on our show, both Sean Lane and also Jaco van der Kooi, I think. But I'm also not 100% sure. So
that's fine.
It's tough. Alex, thank you so much.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much.